Hi. Hello, I'm Vida. I am the community manager at Remedy Entertainment, and this talk is about putting the assist mode in Control. I am coming to you from the future because this part of my talk got erased. Anyway, let's get right into it. First, a few words about me. I work as the community manager at Remedy Entertainment, where I've been for about 3 years now. I helped launch Control, which was my first big game launch. Before that, I worked in mobile games as a content producer, and even before that, I was a games journalist. I've always been passionate about inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility in games. Today, I'm here to share with you some things the Control team learned about implementing the assist mode in Control. So, what are we talking about? I'm going to talk to you about the importance of player and community feedback, which also includes press, as they are players too. I will also talk about the value of having an assist mode in a game designed to be about overcoming difficult odds. I will also share some stats and numbers that we have on how the assist mode is used in our game. Think of this as sort of a community-focused post-mortem of sorts on Control's assist mode. For the uninitiated, a little on Control. We released the game in 2019 and the Ultimate Edition for next-gen consoles the following year. Control is a supernatural third-person action-adventure which challenges you to master the combination of telekinetic abilities, modifiable loadouts, and reactive environments while fighting through a deep and unpredictable world. You play as Jessie Faden, a young woman who comes to the Federal Bureau of Control in search of her missing brother, only to find it invaded by a hostile force called the Hiss. When we created Control, the vision for the game was about overcoming tough odds and feeling powerful. We had a very specific experience in mind. You're never meant to know what's around the corner, and at first you're in constant danger. I'm leaning into the pun here. You're meant to gradually gain more control, both over your abilities and your gear, but also over how you played the game. You get better at it as you go on, but you never quite feel like the threat you're facing is trivial. However, it's never that easy, is it? Here's the thing. Our players were used to a certain kind of Remedy game after Alan Wake and Quantum Break. And they made that known. Many expected a game that's more reliant on story than gameplay, and we didn't meet those expectations. The game didn't teach players too well about how to play it, and the difficulty varied considerably depending what you were doing. Yeah, we know, the difficulty in Control can be very uneven. Also, we didn't clearly differentiate between critical path missions, which were meant to be finished by anyone who played the game, and some side missions, which were more challenging. This made the game's difficulty even more all over the place. We paid a lot of attention to player feedback. Our producer, one of our senior game designers, our principal level designer, members of our QA team, and myself met on a weekly basis back when we launched Control in August 2019. I gathered feedback from all corners of the internet, picked out the most popular sentiments and the most often discussed topics, presented them to the team, and we would discuss it. The important thing here was to openly discuss the community's sentiment with the team. The assist mode was born thanks to meetings like this. Due to the realities of game development, the size of our team, and the scope of the feature, we were able to release the assist mode with a free update to all platforms to the game in August 2020, a year after launch. Instead of releasing a quote-unquote easy mode, what we did was introduce a set of options that lets players tweak the gameplay experience to their liking. We didn't advertise the mode anywhere in the game, although we mentioned its inclusion in update notes and community and marketing communication. Players had to discover it on their own. One of the crucial things about Control's assist mode is that our intention is not to punish players or shame them for using it. You still receive trophies and achievements if you switch the mode on. And since the game doesn't advertise the mode in any way, we've put an explanation for players to click through that outlines what the assist mode does. So to give context, we say that Control was designed to be challenging and rewarding, and we let players know we encourage them to try and start their first playthrough with the assist mode disabled. With options like the assist mode, the priority when communicating how the features work should be the players who need them, and who will definitely be using them. However, we had to be aware of our entire player base as well, not just those who seek out the assist mode, but also those unfamiliar with the sorts of options that games can have which modify the game experience. We had to keep in mind players who are scrolling through the settings, wondering what they do, and who might not know what we mean when we call something assist mode. Personally, I enjoy a game telling me what the recommended settings are, so I can choose to change them if that suits me better. Okay, now let's look at some fun graphs. All the data I'll be sharing was compiled by our analytics team. Thank you for letting me show it. As you can see here, despite us not advertising that we added assist mode to Control within the game itself, and relying on players to find it through word of mouth and their own curiosity, we saw a significant percentage of players across different platforms try the assist mode. The data here is for PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and it shows that out of everyone who completed the main campaign, 34% of PlayStation 4 players, 30% of Xbox One players, and 19% of PC players tried the assist mode at least once. This percentage isn't from all Control players, but only those who saw the feature. Had the feature been promoted among the players, that is, within the game itself, the numbers here could have been even higher than we observed. I'm saying main campaign here. These are the 10 missions in Control that you need to complete in order to finish the story, without taking any side missions into account. As to how players use the assist mode, across all tracked platforms, excluding Xbox Series S and X and PlayStation 5, 64% activated it once and continued playing. 60% adjusted the values for assist mode features once or twice. On the other hand, 17% of players turned the assist mode on and off 3 or more times, while 16% of players tweaked assist mode features 5 or more times. The assist mode is designed so that players can adjust features on the fly or turn them off and on again, but based on our data, it seems like most went with the settings they started with and didn't change them much while they were playing. Here's some more data! This time, we're only looking at console players who completed the main campaign of Control, since that's where the bigger percentage of assist mode users is. In case you're unfamiliar with the features, I'll go over them really quickly. Immortality does what it says on the tin, you can't die. Ammo recovery influences how fast the service weapon reloads. Damage reduction is about how much damage Jessie takes from enemies, and the more you move the slider, the less damage she will take. Energy recovery influences how fast Jessie's energy recovers, as the name says, and lets her use her abilities more frequently the higher it is. Aim snapping and enhanced aim assist influence how much the game helps you with aiming, and how on target you need to be to do damage. We tracked all the options in assist mode here except one-hit kills, sorry about that. But from this, you can see that the features were all used very evenly, with immortality only slightly ahead of the rest. As an additional tidbit, the immortality feature became more popular towards the end of the game, when more players turned it on. Out of everyone who used the assist mode, 24% of players turned on and tried every feature available, as well as one-hit kills, which is not listed here. On average, players used 4 different assist mode features at the same time. Among those who use only one feature, it's by far immortality that's the most popular. It's used in 75% of cases. As to when players turned on assist mode, here's what we have. For this one, we have once again only tracked those who finished the main campaign of Control, and only the main missions, which are listed here, along with the 2 expansions for Control, the Foundation and AWE. 38% of players activated assist mode during the first 2 missions of the game. Most activated during the first mission, which makes sense. That's the part of the game when players are most likely to do a deep dive into the game's settings and tweak them to their preference. But how did all of this affect game completion? Did the usage of assist mode encourage or discourage players from playing the game? Did the game experience change to such a degree that it changed their impression of the game? Were gamers upset? First, the numbers. From this, we can see that the players who used assist mode features were not any less invested into finishing Control than players who didn't take advantage of the mode's options. You can see that 36% of people who finished Control on console did so with assist mode, while on PC that percentage was slightly smaller, at 31%. As I've shown before, assist mode was used on console more frequently, so with that in mind, these numbers make more sense. When this data was first presented internally by our data analyst, it was extremely satisfying to hear the numbers that they showed that the assist mode was a well-used feature. I'm going back to the wording we use when introducing the assist mode to players, as it's very specific. Modify the rules of the game to suit your needs. So, there was initial apprehension within the Control team that the assist mode wouldn't be well received. Because change is always scary. Because you never truly know how a feature is going to be received, especially if it's one that can fundamentally change how your game works. But that's the thing, the assist mode are options. Players don't have to turn them on if they don't want to, or if they don't need to. But the choice is there, should they ever need it. And of course, while every video game has a certain audience in mind when you're making it, at the end of the day, every team wants their game to be played and enjoyed by as many people as possible. The assist mode enabled us to bring Control to an even wider pool of players. Once it was released in August 2020, it was time to once again see what the community was saying. Here's just some feedback I pulled from what our players were saying about the assist mode on social media. I'm going to commit my first PowerPoint crime and read directly from the slides. One person said, "I can enjoy the full story even though I suck at aiming and dodging." Another person said, "I'm a mid-30s dude with kids. I love a good story. I would totally use assist mode." A third person wrote, "Thank you for adding assist mode. It's a godsend, especially for disabled people like me who found the game too difficult without." And a fourth comment said, "Control's new assist mode is a huge boon to the game. Applause to Remedy for letting players face a challenge that suits them." And here's more. Sorry, I'm about to ruin everyone's day reading from the slide again. So one comment says, "I absolutely love this game, but it can be anxiety and rage-inducing at times. Assist mode will let me finish another playthrough without having to worry about getting stuck." A second person said, "I'm trying to get better at aiming on the controller, so I left the assists off, but turned on invincibility. I tried so hard to never get in the red, so I challenged myself that way." And a third person wrote, "I can't stand the first boss. I really was dreading it because it's not a fun, satisfying challenge to me, just frustrating. Seeing that I could flip a toggle temporarily to breeze through it and then go back to my usual difficulty was amazing." And here's some coverage we got from content creators who deal with the topic of accessibility, and from press. I promise that my YouTube history definitely displays something wrong because I've watched these videos multiple times. Now, I'm not showing these to flex, just to further illustrate the point that there are no losers when it comes to implementing something like the assist mode in your games. And so, the inevitable moral of the story, What have we learned? Here's stuff we'll keep in mind for when we decide to implement options similar to the assist mode in our future titles. Of course, prioritization and scope will always be something our game teams need to be aware of, especially considering the size of those teams and the ambition of the features we might implement. And we've always known that listening to our community, our players, and reviews is something that's important. We just need to know we are listening to the right voices, and as community manager, that is mine to ensure. We learned a lot as a team when deciding to implement the assist mode. Most importantly, I think about how to accommodate the wishes and needs of our community while still staying true to what our vision for Control was. I think that was a very valuable lesson. And the work that was done with the assist mode has already been inspiring more discussions about accessibility and how we approach it at Remedy. It's my hope that these discussions will continue to develop and further influence how we think about making games. Lastly, some thanks and some credit. If this recording is slightly darker, that's because the sun is setting. But anyway, thanks to Georgi Stashenko, our data analyst, and to Sergei Mohov, our senior gameplay designer, for help with this talk. Thank you to Sergei, Sean, Janne, Riho, and Krzysztof, and of course to Control's game director, Mikael Kasurinen, who approved the feature. And that brings us to the end. If you have any questions, I am on Twitter at VidaIsOnline, all one word. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to be a dork and sign off on my favorite line from Control. Good luck out there, Star Wanderer. Stay actualized.